Okay, let's do a practical application of how to edge loop something, but in a way where we have to get a repeating pattern. Okay, so I've done two gears here, and they're done differently. This one was actually done with just a plane, and then basically me cutting stuff. And then this one was done actually with the gear primitive tool. And I'm going to show two different ways to do this, but I'm going to use the gear primitive tool first. So let's go ahead and say create polygon primitives, bring a gear out here. And if we go to in our attributes, the poly gear, we go ahead and I'm going to play with this a little bit. Let's bring it out to about, oh, I don't know, like 8 is good. And then the inner radius, I'll just slide that over maybe like that. And then the height, I'm going to do 0.5. These numbers are just what I want, the gear to look like, kind of similar to what I had here. There's no like special settings that I'm doing here. I just want to take the divisions, the height divisions down because I don't really need all of those. And I'm actually going to delete the side, so it doesn't really matter. But I do want to play with the gear tip a little bit. So the gear offset is bringing out that way. And then the gear tip is how much is it tapered. So I think, let's see what the gear middle looks like. Maybe something like that. That's kind of how this one was, although I had it pretty straight. And you have other settings in here. Go ahead and play around with those if you like. This is pretty cool because it kind of makes it look like a flywheel or something like that. But yeah, this is just a run-of-the-mill type of gear, and there we go. That's what I want. All right, so I'm going to go to the front view, and I'm going to just delete all of the faces except for the top face, and I'll just hold X and snap that to my grid. And there we go. This is my good starting point. And what I'm going to do is just make a clone of this because I'm going to show a couple different things. So I might need an extra one later that I can start from scratch. Okay, so first we're going to go over this, which is kind of the most basic simple. And what I'm talking about is the basic simple edge looping here. I'm actually only using like 2, and it holds fine. So if I hit 3 on my keyboard, you can see that it still holds pretty good. If you need it tighter though, that's where we get into this, where you have control with this extra edge. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so to get that shape going, I'm going to go ahead and just get my cut tool out, and I'll hold shift, and I'm going to go ahead and just basically snap this to 10. You don't have to. You can eyeball it. It's fine. We're not manufacturing parts here for real, unless maybe you are trying to 3D print or something like that. Then maybe you are. But I'm just going to do something like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing over here. I'm not doing all of them because that would be tedious. And I'm going to try to show you how to get around doing like an entire thing like this by hand. I mean, you're still doing it by hand, but it's a little bit easier. So let's go ahead and I'm going to snap to 10% there, 10 there, 10 there. Okay. All right. So the other thing I want to do is I'm going to drop at 20% edge into here. That's my one holding edge. And then all I need to do basically is collapse these edges in here. And we will have the basic shape that I showed you from the other one. So let's get the edges here, and we can select all these at once, like so, and just hit collapse. Okay, so now you can see that they're all, basically looking pretty good. I can go ahead and grab these two, hold Control and Shift, and you can slide the edge down a little bit to get the spacing better. And that looks pretty good to me. Now, if you want this to be beveled tighter, you can pull this down. You can do that with all of these. Probably pull them all down at the same time, Control and Shift. You can pull it down like this. You can just get it tighter and tighter to this edge there. You hit 3 on the keyboard, and you can see that you have that, that figured out. Okay, so that works. That looks good. But I don't want to do this for everything because that's way too much work for me. I'm just thinking, I'm trying to think like how can I do this in a fashion that's not as cumbersome. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to delete everything except for my one section right here, which can be repeated around this circle. So I'm not going to get heavy into math here. I'm actually kind of going to work this out with without like doing too much of the maths, if you will. Let me see, did I do that right? I think we need that one too. There we go. Okay, so now I got this here, and I definitely want to make sure that my pivot point's right here. If I was to go ahead and go into my rotate tool, of course we can rotate this around like so, but I also have in my rotate tool right now, I have my snap set up at 0.5 and I have it set to absolute. So normally it's off, and if you hold J, it will change to the absolute. But normally this absolute is set to 15. This is the default in Maya. So if you, oh, what did I just do? Let's see here. For some reason, when I did that, it like stopped working as a. Oh, there it goes. Now it's working again. Okay. So if we hold J, it will swap and turn these snap steps on, whichever you have. Like if you have it set to relative or absolute, it'll turn that on. Okay. So if I'm in a position like this, I can hit Shift D to duplicate this object, and then I can hold J. And you can see my snap toggles on, and then I can just start rotating this, and we can see if we can get this exactly where we need it. Let's turn on our wireframe unshaded. Okay, look at that. So let's look at our rotation here in the channel box. So we're at 22.5. And so without doing like actually doing the math and just kind of figuring that, I would need at least 0.5 increment, I was able to work out how many steps it would take to do this. Now, if we remember correctly, we went to the original gear shape. We have 16 gears right here, right? 16 sides. It's actually, you have the extra ones in between, but it's actually the gears that they're counting. Okay, so since we have 16 sides, if we know the rotation that we need to do, which is 22.5, we could actually even copy that, Control C. Let's copy that, and let's delete this one. And let's just duplicate this a bunch of times and do that rotation on it. Now remember, we have things set up here. We have the pivot's got to be perfectly centered, and this thing needs to be the gear, that's facing upwards. That's going to be the right gear to use. Although any of them actually technically could have worked, but I just like to stay, where it makes sense. It's the most simple. Now you can see right here, I kind of already had this set up. I have my duplicate special options. So it's just edit, duplicate special options. Bring that out, and we can see that I have the rotate in the Y direction. So that's this axis is going to go either 22.5 positive or negative. It doesn't matter. And then we need the number of copies is 16 because we have one here. So, or I'm sorry, 15. We have one, so you subtract that one from your total, and then you get 15. So if I do this and hit apply, then bada bing, we have our object all set up and done. So the next steps, I'm going to actually show you. What the heck? I'll just go ahead and show the next steps right now, and then I'll just do it all over again with the next piece that I made a copy of. So I'm going to grab everything, and I'm going to go to Mesh, Combine, and now they're all one piece. And then I can go ahead and just right click and pick my vertices, and you want to select all the verts. Make sure you have your heads up display on. So if you don't have that on, go to display, heads up display, poly count. So turn that on because you want to be able to watch when you have these all selected. You have 400 verts. You want to watch that. And I like to just make sure that I'm actually merging stuff. I'm going to hit this merge verts, and I have it at a low threshold, so that should be fine. But when I do this kind of thing where I'm merging verts, I also want to make sure that it's not combining verts like that. Okay, so you want to make sure that it's at a low threshold, not combining verts. But you also then want to peek at your heads up display and see that it says 352. So we know it is merging the verts properly, and we're not collapsing verts together that we need. So we should be in good shape here, and we should have like basically a finished shape here. So I'm gonna go ahead and just go back to object mode. Let's delete the history. I can close this out now, and we'll hide the grid for right now. And that looks nice. So if I hit 3 on my keyboard, going all the way around, we have this nice gear shape, and it's relatively low poly. We haven't like gone too high a poly, but it will work for sub D modeling. So if we take this now and let's go ahead and just extrude this out. Let's go to faces, extrude, and I'll pull it up by 1, like so. And then you want to put your mid cut here. Let's do that. And then let's go ahead and just put one there, put one there. And now, oh, maybe we should do the inside as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll drop one in the middle here. 50. And you don't have to snap these. You can just eyeball them and stuff like that. But sometimes I snap them. It just, this time I am. For all you OCD people. So we'd have to do the same thing on the bottom. Okay, so there we go. So now we have all of our edge loops run, and we hit 3 on the keyboard, and bada bing, bada boom. Let's go ahead and deselect this, turn off the wireframe unshaded, so we can see this and make sure that we didn't make any mistakes. Everything looks beautiful. Let's double check our work. Okay, everything looks good. All right, so let me delete the history there. And I'm actually going to go ahead and say mesh display soften edge. Now, this is another way that you can kind of check your work. If you soften the edge and it basically almost looks like it's beveled here, you can see because of the shading now is being rounded around those small little 3-point curves that we have going on there. If you can see that and it looks good, and if we look at all of these, they actually, you'll notice that these all kind of have the same thing going on. If I hit 1, they all kind of look the same. Then we also, that's another indication that you've done everything correctly. Okay, so beautiful. We've got this nice little gear there. We're making a little system here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just zero this one out. Okay, so I lost my audio on the last one, so I'm doing an audio voiceover right here, and I'm playing it at twice the speed. So, okay, so I'm going to do edge looping the wrong way here and show you what happens if you just go ahead and drop edges in like so. If you look at this, you'll note that you get like these flat areas, and that's because the 3 points are holding. They're close together, so they're holding, but we're perfectly smooth in the rest of the area. So that's why we need to isolate our edge looping to the outer half, if you will. So I'm going to put an edge right there in the middle. And then I'm going to start doing some of the cuts like I did before, but this time I'm not going to snap because I want to show you later how to realign stuff if you didn't snap. And I do suggest kind of working more like this because when you're snapping all the time, it actually slows you down a lot. So I would say that, unless you really need it, go ahead and like just work in a fashion where you're sort of eyeballing it. So we're going to sort of the same setup at first, but then we have to do this outer cut. That goes to give us that third edge. This is we're doing this like a little bit more precision here, where we actually do have 3 points turning this corner so that the corner can be held better. It's not necessary always to do this, but it's you might need to. So I just showed there that if the multi-component is on and you're trying to merge edges, it doesn't work. You have to go right into edge mode. All right, so if we have 2 triangles like this in the middle, all we need to do is just go ahead and connect them, and it turns them into 2 quads, and then we can just scale them in a little bit. And now we have that shape from which we saw from the other one like that right there. So it's isolated into that area, and it won't affect the outside. So here I'm just going to delete everything like I did before. and get this stuff aligned. But as I noted, I did this all freehand, so I didn't like snap to specific increments. So I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate and then rotate, and then I'm going to take a look here, and you can see there's a little space. I'm definitely rotating the right increment, but there's a little space there in between these. So all I need to do is actually get in and move those two verts that are wrong. I never touch the rest of the verts, so it doesn't matter. So I'm just going to snap those to the verts that from the other piece, and there you go. Now they're aligned perfectly with what the other side will be, and we can just continue on as we did with the last piece, duplicating stuff. I accidentally extruded that vert. I'm just kind of adjusting right here, just because I'm particular and wanted that a little bit sharper corner. And then we just need to add like one extra edge loop here on the top before we go ahead and start duplicating this around. So now it should be perfect, should be ready to be duplicated. And it's the same as before, so the same increments and everything. So there we go. Everything should be duplicated. You can see it all aligns perfectly. And we just need to combine, merge the verts. I'm going to take a look at my my heads up display, make sure that my vert count goes down, make sure nothing is going wrong. It did go down, so we're good. And then we can just hit 3 and check our bevel. You can see it's a little bit more precise looking than the other method, but it is higher poly, so if you don't need that high polyness or that precision, then you don't necessarily have to do it. But I just wanted to illustrate that you got to be careful touching those outer edges. Now I'm going to do this other one here, and I'm going to approach it like sort of in a different way, because we're going to basically use a grid here or a plane, if you will, to create a gear. And we're going to use a bend deformer. That's the surprise at the end, a bend deformer to go ahead and bend this around. Okay, so this is going to be, these 4 polygons here is basically what these 4 polygons are, and I'm going to extrude out. That's where like the gear is, the actual protrusion of the gear. Now there's a bug in this extrude tool. For some reason it wasn't working right with the cut tool, so I was trying to cut, and you'll see here in a second that like the cut tool kept failing for some reason. So I tried it again. I was thinking like, oh, maybe I did something wrong, or I don't know. But I tried it again, and it happened again. So at that point, I always save my file. Like if I see that happen, I'm like, oh goodness, save your files in increment or whatever. I tried it with a different tool. I was like, okay, so I checked it, and it seemed fine. So I tried it with a different tool, the extrude tool, and you could set that like specifically to an increment that you wanted to extrude, so that kind of works better sometimes, which I did there, and I just scaled it in. And then I used the cut tool again, like I normally would, and then bada bing, it worked. So I kind of had this feeling that it would work with the other tool, and after you're using Maya for so many years, you sort of get those intuitions. I'm just cutting it a little bit tighter this time, just because of the fact that this piece is just a little bit of a tighter piece. So I'm going to go ahead and collapse these, and then I'm just going to lower this edge a little bit so it's straight with the other edge, so they kind of align better, like so. And now, instead of like doing the rotation, I'm actually going to do a move, and then I'm going to move the pivot and snap the pivot to the other piece. So I just hit D on the keyboard, hold V, and then hit D again, and then I'm just going to hold V again and snap it to the bottom piece right there. Now you can see that these aren't matching up, obviously, but instead of keeping the original piece, I'm actually going to keep the one I just created, and I'm just going to move the verts there and snap that to these outer. That was really just that one vert that wasn't aligned correctly, so that's the only one that we needed. So now we can just, if you want to zero that out, you can zero that out. And like I said before, we're obviously not doing a rotation this time. We're going to do basically like a translation. So I'm just resetting the tool here, and I'm just going to translate 6 units, because I know that was the size of my object. So 6 units, and then 15, and then hit apply. And then you get all of this stuff, and of course it's getting messy here, so I'm going to move my stuff around, just move that over, and then I can select everything and just do the same process as before of combining and merging verts. So I'm going to go ahead and combine, merge all the verts, make sure nothing gets welded that I want it to get, that shouldn't be welded. And then I'm going to put a bend deformer. Now it comes in the wrong way, so I'm going to go ahead and rotate it 90 degrees. And then even then, it's still not rotated correct. So you can see, like, that's how you can make a crown. You know, so you have to rotate it another 90 degrees. On the Y, I thought it was the X, but I forgot I had already done one rotation, so it was actually the Y. So you'll see me here do it in the X, and it was the wrong one, and I realized that, so I put it in the Y. And then you do the curvature again, and you can see you can curve in or out. Now you don't always get a little space, but sometimes you do, and usually you have to like work out what that number is, and I think it came out to be like 2.5 or something like that. So I just overdriv it to like negative 180.25, and then it was like perfectly aligned out. So then what you need to do from there, now here's an interesting thing. I forgot to do the top cut, and I realized it at this point. So I was like, oh, I got an idea. I'll just go ahead and zero this out. And then I'll go into my top view, which I do. I'll go into the top view, and I'm going to use my cut tool. And so I'm just going to hold shift and drag all the way across. And you can see I cut all the way across. Now, what I wasn't taking into account is that now my history is in a weird order. So when I go to bend again, and I'm actually going to move the bend right to the middle because I was thinking it would get rid of that extra gap, but it didn't. But I'm going to go ahead and bend again, and watch what happens. Then my cut, I noticed the cut doesn't work right. And so I'm looking at it at the top. I'm going, wait a second, something's wrong here. And then it dawned on me that the issue is that because I did the cut after the bend in the history, when you do the bend, the cut actually stays in place, so it's only on like one little piece that was at the top. So then what I had to do is basically I have to collapse. So I'm showing how that works right there. So this is just a little object lesson that you have to have your history in the right order. So I have to collapse, get rid of, or I should say delete the history and get rid of the bend tool so that doesn't happen. And then it will lock everything in. So now I go ahead and delete the history and put a new bend on it, and then I just have to rotate it back to the way I had it before. So I'd already done it once, so I knew that it was in the 90 degrees. So then I go ahead and do that, and then I actually copied the number, the 80.25 or negative 180.25. So I just paste that in there and then hit enter, and then everything's perfectly aligned. And now you just delete your history, and now you've got your gear set out, and then you just do your merge verts, and then you can go ahead and check it. Now this one, I should say you have to do the merge verts there too, because there's still one open edge. Now the reason why I showed it again was because this is how I do a lot of stuff with like car tires and things like that. So it's an object lesson, even though I think the other way is maybe easier for this type of thing, but it'll come up when you're doing other types of objects. That's it for this one. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.